Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar, looking at student and institutional response to COVID-19. This webinar is jointly organised by the KSI, Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, and also iGraduate. Let me briefly introduce both myself and the panel. My name's Guy Perring. I'm the Regional Director for iGraduate here in Asia. Let me introduce to you Mr. Voon Yi, who's Research Director for the KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, the co-organisers of this event. Professor Yong, who's the Associate Vice-Chancellor, International for the University of Malaya. Professor Chris Baldwin, who's the Provost and CEO of Newcastle Medical School down in Johor. Travis Lee, who's President in Malaysia for AIESEC, which is a global youth-led organisation focused on developing leadership in young people through the facilitation of cross-cultural internships and volunteer experiences. And also Vinci, who's the President of the Association of Malaysian Economics Undergraduates, AMEU, and is also a final year student at Nottingham University here in Malaysia. Before we begin, I'm going to give you a little bit of context, just a few slides. So let me just quickly share my screen. My organization essentially runs, we're an education research company, and we essentially look at the student experience and we run surveys measuring that student experience. And we recently ran a free survey across universities globally, looking at the student experience. We ran it from May to September, so it's specifically obviously looking at the university response to the COVID-19 crisis. We had over 25,000 responses in 44 institutes globally, and in terms of Malaysia, we had around 1,200 responses. Malaysia actually did very well comparing itself with other countries. As you can see from this slide, we asked students, were they satisfied with their institution's response to COVID? And you can see 79% of Malaysian students were either satisfied or very satisfied, which compares very favorably with the global average of 70%, slightly behind Germany, but well ahead of the UK and Australia. We also looked at the student satisfaction with the online learning experience. And again, you can see Malaysia doing well. 75% of students were either satisfied or very satisfied. Again, comparing favorably with the global average of 68% and well ahead of UK and Australia. We drilled down into a little bit more detail of the areas that they were satisfied with. And you can see that across the board, in terms of lectures and tutorials, in terms of the online learning resources and access to online library, in terms of tests and exams, in terms of assignment and group work, again, ahead of the global and also ahead of the UK and Australia. The one area where there was perhaps some concern for Malaysian students was continuing further studies or completing their course or graduating. And you can see that 69% of Malaysian students were either concerned or very concerned with either continuing their further studies, completing their course, or graduating. And the final slide that I want to look into today was what the concerns are that students had across the world. And it was fairly consistent. The two main concerns for students were physical and mental health risks, and also the impact on my future career. And you can see it's fairly consistent in terms of across those key nations that we looked at: Australia, Germany, Malaysia, New Zealand, and the UK. You can see those two things: the physical and mental health risks, impact on my future career. We also looked at completing my studies on time, funding my studies, social isolation, and travel restrictions were all areas of concern. So I hope that gives sort of some background and some context. But now we'll move to the panel. I've got a series of questions that I will ask. Hopefully, if you're attending, you can also ask your own questions. There's a Q&A at the Q&A, and there's also a chat room. You'll be able to post your questions, and obviously, we'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. If you have specific questions to the individual panelists, they may well be able to answer those in written form rather than spoken. So feel free to post any questions that you wish. If we don't have time to get round to them, we'll try and answer them after the webinar. So let's start the conversation, and let's start with the students, the most important stakeholders perhaps in this whole process. And let's turn to Vinci. Vinci, who's currently a student at University of Nottingham, but also president of the Association of Malaysian Economic Undergraduates. Vinci, as a student and a student leader, how has the last year been for you? And how do you feel that both the institution and the student body have responded?
So all in all, I would say it has been a very miserable year for all of us right here. And it has been full of challenges that is completely new to all of us as well. So we have to understand that the traditional approach of how things work will no longer work the same. So for my university, Nottingham University of Malaysia campus, the management managed to respond quickly to the contingency plan. So immediately after that, the government announced to have a lockdown back in March. They already quickly responded on that. All of the physical classes has been replaced by online lectures as well as examination. So it has been replaced by more or less open book tests, so that it requires a deeper level of understanding rather than just you can just cheat, you know. So as for AMEU, I would say it's our first time in organizing virtual events because in the past, all of our events are held physically. So we will be managed to interact with the participants more and manage to understand if we really meet the expectation in delivering the student value. But in order not to compromise on the quality of content, our team actually conducted a lot of trial and error on all the virtual platforms on which platform is the best in running our events. And yeah, so it's important to find which platform that suit us the most as a non-profit organization, especially. So I think that during this unprecedented time, it's very important for us to have a little bit more patience for everyone. So I believe we are all in this learning phase and we can go through this COVID together, I suppose. Yeah.
Great, yes, thank you very much. Yes, we're all in together, both students and universities. Thank you. Travis, over to you. You obviously represent a youth-led organisation, but you mentioned that to me earlier that you have a lot of students who work with you. Tell me what kind of issues they've been going through over this last year.
Okay. Hi. So this is Travis from AIESEC Malaysia. So basically, we are a youth organization that developing leadership through voluntary program and also internship program globally. Yeah, so currently we have around 500 membership. So of course, when the kicks in of COVID-19, definitely it gave us a big slap because what we are doing and advocating is, cultural exchange, right? Regarding on volunteer and talent. But with the, kicks in of COVID-19, of course, that would no longer be that applicable and feasible for us. Yeah, so back then in February, at that time, we are already planning ahead on how we can pivot our business model. So for example, can we change on focusing local volunteer instead, right? If we cannot do global, I think we should still put focus on our community needs. Yeah, because this is why we do volunteering, right? Yeah, but then of course the result is a no for us because of the MCO happened. Yeah, so at that time, me and my team actually made a bold decision to pioneer virtual volunteer. Yeah, so meanwhile, of course, we still want to stay community relevant. Because that is the essence of what we do. And that's why we do so much for the entity and also community. So in the process, I think we go through a lot of difficult and challenging thinking process, as in, how to do design thinking, how to improvise our business model. Then at the end, we decided to target on the B40 student, like the student that their household income is below 40% of Malaysia population, because they are the people that are showing more in needs under COVID-19 situation. and we want to pivot our project to be the education solution for them in providing them laptops. So our impact is not just only for a few weeks, but it is more long lasting in this COVID-19 period. Yeah. And I think the second thing, I think actually it's a very great pause for our organization, at least. I believe for some corporate as well, to review where we are. Yeah, so a lot of the time for the organization, we emphasize and we talk about a lot about growth, you know, expansion, financial growth, our size of, you know, expansion. But then most importantly, we have to remind ourselves that we are actually in an infinite game. So in an infinite game means that we are not here to win, but we are here to stay in the game and sustain. Yeah, so when COVID-19 bring us so much restructural impact to the whole country, I think it's very important for everyone to pause a while to see how we can still understand the trend to stay relevant for the community. Yeah, and the last thing I think is a very funny thing that we realize as well is that we cannot always build a future for the youth. Yeah, but we can build the youth for the future because we'll never know what is going to happen next. I think no one estimated there would be a global pandemic to come in, and suddenly all those traveling industry, they will be temporarily being paused. Yeah, but people's is always our greatest asset and also the power for the country. Yeah, because they are the pillar to support no matter what industry we are, what kind of organization we are in. Yeah, so that's why we also focusing a lot on learning and development, on sales, digital marketing, design thinking, because I think that would be what Malaysia right now would be needed. And I think that is another thing is about the virtual engagement. Like we have a lot of connection trying to initiate within our membership. Yeah, I think that is something that we are currently doing so far. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yes, and of course, it has been an opportunity in some ways for organisations and universities and people to sort of pause and stop and reflect on why they're there and sort of think about strategic plans moving ahead. And interesting, you mentioned about virtual volunteering. We've also had a lot about virtual internships. I'm sure Professor Yong will later talk about virtual collaborations, etc. So thank you for those comments. Chris, if we could perhaps move over to yourself. What are the key things that your institution got right during the pandemic? And perhaps you can also tell us if there are things that you might have done differently as well.
Thank you, Guy. I think all universities will say that it's a very steep learning curve going from normal face-to-face teaching on campus, and although we will have done some virtual teaching, to suddenly go to complete virtual teaching essentially overnight, and that's a steep learning curve for both students and for staff. And I think it took some time to get used to everything, and I think that takes a while. I think we also have to realize that we have to programs. It sounds a bit technical, but we all have learning outcomes. We have to make sure that we meet what we're meant to do so people can graduate, and that's requirements from the MQA or with us from the UK as well, or the Malaysian Medical Council. So we have to put these things together. And I think the other thing we have to think about is that with virtual teaching, if you look at MOOCs, people only get something like 5 to 10% completion rates. So it is hard. It's a very different thing to study online. And so I think it has taken a while to get good. I think one of the things that I would say that I think we've got right is it's very strong support for students. So we put in, make sure that students have their tutors are on hand to talk to them. Their mentors are there to talk to them when they need help. And there's a very strong support, because I think maybe with normal online learning experiences, there isn't that. So to have that support for students, if they're worried, if they have problems, then we can come in with that. I think we developed our program. I think we started off by giving lectures online. They could be either synchronous, so that's how I give them, so that means a live lecture, or that can be asynchronous, where people will put up lectures. I think people have developed now, so something that we're going on in our medical school is we're bringing in patients, and actually we're now doing this, so outpatients maybe with mental health problems or patients with diabetes, you can actually get them, so students can actually do a live, essentially a live interview with them, and so they can diagnose those patients and talk to those patients, so you can begin to do more things. I think there is an overall thought is though there are things that you can do online, but I think we have to develop more very clear SOP, because with medicine, also with engineering, other science subjects, you will have to do things that are practically involved. So you do have to get people on campus. I think maybe the things that we have not done as well as we could have to start with is maybe communication with students. We do need very clear communication to let students know what we're doing. I think maybe that wasn't quite as good when we started. And I think one of the problems is that though we were trying to communicate quickly, and maybe we communicated too quickly. As you know, the government will make an announcement. Students will hear that announcement exactly the same day that we hear that announcement. And then students are immediately 2 minutes afterwards, when we had the CMCO, I had emails from students, what do we do with the CMCO? And I think we maybe tried to reply too quickly before we knew everything that was happening, rather than sitting back and telling students, leave it for a week so we can work out what's happening. I understand why we needed to reply quickly. And so I think we need to make sure our communication is really clear, to make sure students know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and allow those things to happen as we go along. Hopefully we're better with our communication now.
Great, thanks, Chris. Prof Yong, and the same question to you, really. What are the key things that you got right, and what are the key things that you think you should have done differently over this period?
Thank you very much, Guy. Thank you for inviting me into this session. I totally agree with the previous others have said. The past months has been undergoing very steep learning curve, and very much has been echoed by the others. Suddenly, teaching and learning become the forefront, and over the past months, we totally changed everything. So just picking up on the verbal themes that mentioned by Vinci and Travis, whereby suddenly the focus is very much on, we experiment on things on the teaching and learning. We have to have the design thinking and all those things coming in. So really, over this pandemic actually has taught us to learn from each other. We have to innovate things that we usually do, and how do we overcome this? I think as a community, within the campus itself, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of sharing sessions among us to improve the things that we do. So to me, that is something that before COVID, we really have to kind of push people to work together. We have to even in research itself, although we say we have interdisciplinary kind of research, at the end of the day, in reality, it is very much in silo. The same thing with teaching and learning. Look, I've been teaching this course for 20 years. Don't tell me I need to be changing the way I teach, and it is not necessary for me to be sharing my course with another person. But bang, with this everything going online, for me, for a 20-year-old, perhaps somebody who has been teaching for many years, to be delivering a course that has been for 20 years face-to-face to online, and to ensure that students engage in your teaching and all the different, not just the using technology, but also really making sure that you deliver your content, examination, things like that, is a total overhaul. And in doing so, the experiences, the sharing from others really is something that we have been doing all this, the 10 months, and I think that it is offered great value. Very much, just onto the second question, you say, what are the things that we wish that we would have done better? Similar, I think, communication. So the pandemic we had to make decisions, very quick decisions, and in making decisions, we kind of tend to forget to consult, to have their views on that, to communicate well why we make such decisions. So that's pretty much my input on this one. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, so similar issues that Chris raised about the communication, but as you say, sometimes the government decides very quickly on the policies, and there's little time for consultation, and sometimes a week later they might change those policies again. Okay, let's move on to Voon. Voon, obviously you're heading up a think tank in terms of the research. You've had time hopefully to ponder some of these questions in a little more detail. what do you think the major issues have been over the last few months?
Thank you very much, Guy. And before I answer that, I'd just like to express our gratitude to iGraduate and the Tribal Group for partnering with us with this webinar and coming up with a very timely and apt discussion on the issues that higher education institutions are facing. We also conducted a survey towards the beginning of the MCO. We found very similar responses to what iGraduate has. And I think what's important to realize is most universities were prepared, not that they were expecting a pandemic, but they were prepared to go online. And distance learning was relatively highly used by many universities. And there's also the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, which are also quite highly used. So the transition of it was smooth, but I think the misconception that many people aren't seeing is it is only applicable to certain courses. So business courses, social science courses, they are able to adapt relatively quickly, especially in this day and age where most lecturers already have PowerPoints, and the tutors, they usually come with PowerPoints as well. The main problem is the science and engineering courses. If you don't go to the university, online learning and online solutions are not going to be of help to a science or engineering candidate, especially if they go to university and they're not able to go to university, not able to access their samples, they're not able to access their lab rats, or they cannot, for engineers, they cannot access the equipment. These things are, there's only one way to come out with the results, and they do need to go in. So these are the ones that are struggling with the current situation that we have. And it doesn't help when the government doesn't give very clear directives on what should be done. The standards keep changing. So, and for PhD candidates, for honors students, the results do matter because they may consider this as a career path. And if they're not able to go into the labs to do their research, it will affect, it can potentially have a negative impact on the career. My suggestion would be to consider this as important as work. And I think at one point, the government did allow them to go back to universities, but and this should be the case. And yes, the pandemic has gotten worse, but we already have procedures in the business community to have letters to return to work. The same can be done for students who are in this field. So fine, if the business, commerce, and social sciences do not need to go back to universities for classes because they still can function with online learning methods, fine. But engineers, science-based students, TVET, vocational studies, if they need to go back, perhaps a system can be devised to give them allowance to return to university so that they complete their tasks. Because if they don't, they just not able to. You cannot expect every engineering student to have like a machine in their homes, like a 3D printer or whatever they use, or each scientist to have the scientific equipment, lab equipment in their homes. It's just not realistic. They need to go back to universities to complete their findings. And I think another area where we looked into, because in the survey that we conducted, we were very concerned with how many students would be caught out by the pandemic, because we were expecting massive layoffs in the workplace, and the possibility that many students couldn't continue. So the interesting finding is that didn't seem to be the case. Only 1.3% of our respondents said that they will be deferring or dropping out of their studies. And the reason for the ability for many of them to continue is because they got PTN, or their parents have saved up enough financial resources for them to continue ahead of time. But that said, the survey was done in late March and early April. Things may have changed by then. But it's not to say that 1.3% is not important. This makes it even more feasible for the government to target equitable policies to help these students who have no other option due to the financial restrictions that we have. And I also like to touch upon the fact that the main issue that I think many students have complained about online learning is the fact that infrastructure is not available. So the typical complaints would be they do not have enough internet access. Perhaps the place they live has poor coverage, or the fact that they are stuck at home if they have a class, especially if they are from the B40 families, the lower income families. They probably be stuck at home with television on at one side, and the siblings running around, and it's a noisy environment to learn. So yeah, they will have these kind of restrictions, and infrastructure is something that that nobody can fix except the government. So there needs to be a more concerted effort to focus on the provision of fiber optics in every area that we can. So COVID is, as much as it's a real pain, it is a wake-up call to the government to provide the appropriate infrastructure. We all heard the story of the girl who, I've forgotten her name, that went up onto a tree in Sabah to get internet. And I'm sure many students, not only in Sabah, Sarawak, or the remote areas of Peninsular Malaysia, even in densely urban populations, we will have this issue, because if you do not have a fiber broadband service at home, you might be using your phones as a tool to get on the internet. And if you live in a condominium or apartment which is, with many walls, you will not be able to get that kind of connection. So even if you are from a well-to-do family, you may not have the services that is required to have smooth education. And another complaint that was regularly mentioned was the fact that many lecturers and tutors, they may not know how to use the system. So there were a lot of interruptions in terms of that is attributed to digital illiteracy. So this is the one area where universities, higher education institutes, they need to double their efforts. Because normally when a lecturer comes in to teach, the university's technical audiovisual team will set up everything for them. So overnight with COVID, everybody needs to be a audiovisual expert. So I remember a time where I had to figure out how to run PowerPoints for my lecturer, and now they have to do all these things by themselves, at home, and there will be issues of, you cannot hear what they're teaching, or the share screen is not working. Technical difficulties, they always pop up when you need them the most. So I think, but that said, given time, I think we will, lecturers, regardless of age, they will overcome this problem. And it's just a matter of getting used to. So maybe with some training, they're able to adapt faster, but they definitely get the hang of it. Just like how older generation, grandparents, they may not like the idea that you've given them a phone as a gift, but 2 weeks later, they'll be busy sending WhatsApp messages to you, with all sorts of stories. So they will get the hang of it. So I think I'll just end here. Maybe we can have a longer chat later on. Thank you, guys.
Great, thanks, Voon. Prof Yong, maybe you can comment on, how have you reached out to those B40 students who obviously don't necessarily have the access to the laptops or the infrastructure, or are in crowded homes? Has University of Malaya managed to make some adjustments for their benefit?
Thank you, Guy. Yes, so when we had to make changes, or when we do things differently, even before, when everybody goes into the MCO, we really wanted to make sure that no one is left behind. So the first thing we did was to mobilize all the coordinators at the faculties to be reaching out to the students, especially in the B40, to find out what are the problems. So we ran a survey. What's the problem? Is it because they don't have the devices, or is it because they can't afford the plan, or is it because the way where they are staying, they don't have the internet connectivity and things like that? So once we've got the survey, we further reach out on the second round of survey for the postgraduate students as well. So with that, at the same time, we also reach out to telco companies to find out if we could try to come up with some package where we could co-finance, because like Vinci has mentioned, it's really the B40 that we are really concerned. So we managed to get in touch with one telco that provide something that we can afford. So this is really a big investment for the university to ensure that everybody is not left behind when we do the teaching online. So we actually, the university invested quite a big amount of money to ensure for the next 6 months, this B40 have got all the assistance. So the telco actually sent the SIM card and everything to their homes. So that's one. And another one, we also reach out to the middle income as well, where we engage another telco that could actually offer an affordable, plan for them. And also we have got quite a big number of students in the M40 who actually also take up such, such plan. So yeah, so that's my answer to your question, Guy.
Great, thanks. Vinci, maybe you could comment. In terms of the students that you know, have they had issues with the infrastructure and getting access and having their own laptops? Obviously, you represent, quite a number of students. Have they had the same issues in terms of access?
I think to touch on this, because Nottingham is essentially at a very remote place, I would say. So majority of us actually stay on campus. So my university actually provided an option for students who stay on campus to continue having all the access on that's available on the campus to continue their online study. If you choose to return home, there's also support that you can seek from all of your lecturers and your mentor on how are you going to conduct your online study. As for international students, I think for Nottingham, we did record all of our lectures and make it available online, so that the international student can be still at their home country while watching all the lectures.
Great, thank you. Travis, how about you? I mean, obviously, you mentioned already that part of your NGO's role is to help that B40 group. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you've reached out to them to ensure they do have access to the online learning that universities are offering.
Okay. Yeah, so actually, we are bridging the gap with our voluntary project. So before, the execution of the project, we have undergone some research to understand what is the major difficulties that they are facing. And then after the, research output, then we know that maybe they are the target audience that we should target for, under COVID-19 situation. Then we start a lot on the project designing. And most importantly, it comes to that is about the sales part, like how we can present the idea to get support from external. Yeah, but luckily, I think among our 16 branches of AIESEC entity in Malaysia right now, I think around 5 to 6 of them are able to secure laptops for the B40 student. And one of the branches in definitely they are also achieving this as well. And the idea of what Dr. Yong just say about the SIM card, I actually also heard about from my local chapters about it. Yeah, so actually it went well for the result, as we are securing around more than, I think it's around 20 laptops to the B40 students. Yeah, and also.
And sorry to interrupt. And so that's you're sort of acting as a bridge between the student and the corporate providers.
I would say you can, is to simplify, you can say in that way. Yeah, but we are giving the laptop and also the virtual project as well. Yeah, so soon we deliver the laptop to them. They are connected to our virtual voluntary project. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a combination of the two. Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. Great, thank you. Chris, if we can move over to you. Obviously, you're a medical expert as well as a university leader. So we have two sort of areas that you can cover. And the responses to the pandemic have been very different in the UK and Malaysia. I know it's a difficult question to answer, but why was that and who got it right?
Thank you, Guy. I should first say, well, I'm actually an immunologist is my background, so I'm not actually a virologist or a public health expert, but I can maybe make some comments.
You certainly know more than we do.
I think firstly we should say thank you very much to Dato' Hisham and Ministry of Health here in Malaysia, because they've done a fantastic job. They really have been working hard. I think that my staff think that we're working hard. I think that the MOH teams have been doing a fantastic job. I think in the context of what they've done well here in Malaysia, I think there is a fantastic, excellent test, track and trace team. It's lots of people going out, talking to the people who've actually had COVID-19 and talking to all their people. I think in the UK, people have tried to rely on apps and various things which don't work. You need that personal contact. A phone call to say, who did you talk to isn't good enough. You need to go along. But that is a big workload by a lot of people going along. So that's really number one. I think number two, although it may have caused problems for us as a university with getting students in and staff in, I think having the border restrictions and having the quarantine restrictions is extremely important, and they never did that in the UK, and I think that was a big mistake in the UK. So by having those border restrictions, stopping people coming in, making sure you have your 2 weeks quarantine is fantastic. Number three, I think people in Malaysia have actually followed the rules, and they want to follow the rules. And I think very much it is about wearing a mask is about protecting other people. It's not against your civil liberties, but in the UK and America, people say, oh, I can't do this. This is against my people in Malaysia realize it is to protect other people, and people want to do that. And I think that that's very important. And I think finally, and it's something that people maybe don't know, is that here in Malaysia, when you get a COVID-19 diagnosis, you will be taken into hospital and you will be looked after straight away. In the UK, you won't go into hospital until you've actually got getting severe symptoms. So I think by taking people in early and treating people early, this is probably one of the reasons why the fatality rate is lower in Malaysia than a lot of other countries, because they're being looked after and monitored right from the beginning. So I think that there's some of the really good things that we have here in Malaysia. And I will say, I think it is much better than the UK and some of the things that maybe they didn't do in the UK from my perspective.
Yeah, and what about the university sector? Do you think the university sectors have reacted differently?
I think it's rather strange. It seems to me at the minute in Malaysia, they seem to be closing down the schools and the universities, while in the UK, they seem to be keeping the schools and the universities open. And it's very different. I think the universities, from what I get in Malaysia, everyone's trying to do their best. And I think the same in the UK, everyone's trying to do their best. I think it's very similar. Everyone's been put in the same situation, is that you've had to go online, and everyone has this sudden big learning curve. And I think, as Prof Yong said, you've had people who've been doing something the same for 20 years and then they suddenly had to learn. And I think that has been a stress for people, but people have now got used to it. And I think that the good things that we're getting out of this, and you may come to this later, we will be keeping as we go on into the future.
Great, thank you very much. Prof Yong, if I can move over to you, in terms of your role in terms of collaboration. One of your roles is to enhance collaboration and engage international networks in providing solutions to global problems. How has that continued, or could it continue during this unprecedented year? And what solutions have you found to continue the international networks and international collaborations?
Thank you very much, Guy. Well, what is very clear is that the COVID-19 really impact on mobility, really a huge impact on the campus internationalization, even cross-border research, collaboration, massive disruption. But to move forward with this COVID-19, what is very clear is that, if we reflect back what has been going on for the last few months, what we have done to survive is that we learn from each other. We rely on each other. We learn the best practices from each other. So this is the way to go forward. In other words, the integration of internationalization is even more so important. We must actually integrate the internationalization within our goals, our strategies. One example on the teaching and learning. So for the past few months, there's a lot of innovations. We learn new tricks, we know platforms, we know things are suddenly free. So in order to do that, to learn from each other, that's where we learn from our international partners. So that's why I think to move forward, the agenda of internationalization must be embedded within the goals, within the core values of the institution itself. So another example on mobility. People are moving on to virtual mobility. And when we exchange ideas with friends, when we have series of webinar, I can see the notion of virtual mobility is taking more shape, in the sense that it's just not happening visually. People are asking, how do we add value to that? How do we connect with internationalization at home? What would be the takeaway for the students? Will that actually improve student skills? Will it be replaced had it been, the usual mobility? So these are some of the key questions people keep on asking each other, and improve the things that we do before COVID-19. So in essence, I would say the whole idea of moving forward to be resilient, we need to learn from each other. We need, because we are all, the whole world experiencing the same thing. So it is even more evident to have the element of internationalization with good partners, reaching out to good partners, reaching out with universities within the region to learn from each other. So that's pretty much my feedback on that. Thank you, Guy.
Thanks. Prof. Yong, can I just ask a follow-up? In terms of virtual mobility, do you think that can replace, the travel that students were dreaming of doing and we were used to doing? Or
yes, so that has been discussed in quite a number of webinars, where people are looking at, right, so if you're going for the recovery, people are looking at hybrid. I mean, if we are safe to travel again, a lot of the international office says that we're not going to abandon virtual mobility 100%. It will be there to stay. It will actually add value to the physical mobility that we have had. So people are looking at more innovative ways to engage students, where before even going, they have already got the skills, they have already got experience, even at the campus itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So it sort of expand. Obviously, a limited number of students are able to take part in mobility programs. So virtual mobility may expand the ability of more students to take part in that.
Yeah. It actually widened the accessibility, because in the past, to have mobility, it's expensive, especially for ASEAN countries to be going to the United Kingdom or even in the US. It's really expensive. But with virtual mobility, we can be going anywhere. We can be engaging with students from any part of the world. So, we are widening the accessibility for the students at large.
Guy, can I just add in there that we have to think that obviously the global climate emergency that's going on, and so this has probably helped us to move away from the thought that we have to travel everywhere and fly everywhere and travel everywhere. So I think things like this, things that are conferences that maybe staff would go to, you can do these things. I can go to a conference in America. Okay, I have to stay up a bit later, but I'm not traveling, I'm not using the carbon, a whole range of different things. So I think that there's lots of novel things. I know students like to travel, but I think that there are different ways of doing things and different ways of learning things. And as we go on, I think that this will get more and more.
Vinci, maybe you could comment on what Chris said about the opportunities for mobility, virtual mobility, but also I wanted to ask you about the importance of the student voice, and whether you feel you've had the opportunities that the students have stated their views. At the beginning of the webinar, Prof Baldwin and Prof Yong maybe said that perhaps students at the very beginning, there wasn't the opportunity to consult as much as perhaps they could have done. Obviously, that was because of the speed of the changes that were taking place. So I guess my main question is to you is how important is the student voice?
Personally, as a student myself, I think that it's really important to have a channel for the voice of students to be heard. So as mentioned by Prof Yong and Professor Christopher as well, that they think communication is really important because the students are just as miserable as everyone in the country. So since the default mode of learning is very different from what we used to experience, so I think that personally for learning, for online learning experience can be very different for everyone as well, since not everyone can really afford to commit 100% to online classes due to various different circumstances, as mentioned by Voon previously on the survey that they actually conducted on family issue where parents might not be very supportive in terms of online learning or even lack of resources and unstable connection. So I think it would be great if university can really provide a platform for students to express their concerns or provide mental health support in this situation. So it's really important to for university and students to make the communication clear and make reasonable arrangement in helping the students in how can we commit better in our online studies so that we wouldn't, there won't be a delay in our timeline. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and clearly that was expressed in the survey, wasn't it? That students were concerned about continuing their studies, and you've already expressed concerns about completing your dissertation, etc. Yeah. Travis, how about from your point of view in terms of the importance of the student voice and making sure it's heard both by institutions and by government and other stakeholders?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think definitely youth voice is super important to be heard because if you know about Malaysia population, basically almost half of them is youth. Yeah, so I think so they will be and they are already the main character of the community and also the country. Yeah, they are no longer the future leaders, but they are the current leader. Yeah, so I think it's very important for us to get to know what they want and what they are having in mind. So as a lot of them are coming from Generation C, so their behavior will be a little bit different with the older generation because in their generation, a lot of opportunity are available. Like if I don't choose option A, I would still have option B and C. So they will have a lot of, they would love ownership by co-creation. If you wish them to, understand more about them and to agree or support on what we are doing. So they need more input from their side so that they own that decision together. So this is what I observe. And second of all, I think I echo with what Voon just said about the Sabah girl story. Yeah, so I think for listening the youth voice, not just only listen as in what they want, but it's also about what they need. Yeah, so for example, about the B40 student situation, that is the things that they are very urgent in need about internet accessibility. So I think government has done several initiatives for those stakeholders, but I think they may be lacking a little bit of youth network. So that's why in terms of implementation or execution, it's still a little bit lacking behind as well. And I think thirdly, it's about the health of the students. So I think this is very important, as in mentally and physically. Yeah, so for right now, we are facing, laptop sitting in front of it, spending so much time on lesson or other engagement. Actually, their attention span would be much more lower than comparing to physical engagement. So I'm just not so sure would the university would be, changing the, class schedule to be less packed on one day, but we continuously have more touch point with the student. Like, would it be better for us instead of packing all the lesson on one day, let's say, yeah, and also the physical accompanying, I'm not so sure would university or other youth organization can play a role into it because I think, at the end, human is still a very, it's like an animal that we need a lot of connection. And I think that is true. Yeah, so, and I think lastly, it's also the obstacle that we mentioned in the first point is about communication, right? When we are driving changes in COVID-19. So I think when we are if we are driving changes to happen, like it's a human nature that people resist change. So that is super important for us to know how we can drive people with telling them the purpose and the awareness. Yeah, so we don't directly delegating the change to them, but we talk about why we are having that and why we are on the same direction on this goal. Yeah, so I think that is super important, especially for youth, because they want to be heard. And again, the co-creation that I mentioned just now. Yeah, so I think that is the thing.
Great. Chris, maybe I could ask you about, obviously in the UK, we have the National Union of Students, and there's perhaps not such a representative body here. I mean, obviously, both Vinci and Travis represent, students in it, but there's no sort of national body that does that. Would that be a good idea for Malaysia, do you think?
As you know, Guy, we've been looking at this as part of the British Malaysia Chamber of Commerce, and I think the development of student unions would be a very useful development here in Malaysia. I think it would start off as student unions, in particular universities, to start off with. Then I think that you'd have to look at whether you would want a national a student union. As you know, the National Student Union in the UK is very political, and there are times when you may be thinking it's looking at political things and not things for students. Sure. So I think that the development first, because it's not used, would have to come through individual universities. Sure. There has to be a very strong working between staff and students, so they trust each other, they can work together, responsibility is handed for students and things. Once you see that work, then I think then you might want to decide 5 or 10 years down the line whether you wanted a national student a national student union. I think to start off like that, maybe going a little bit too far to start with is my personal opinion at the moment, because I know students Sure. are worried about it at the minute anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Prof Yong, I mean, your student body is very vocal. The Student Representative Council that you have, and I know they have a seat at the Senate and can attend the Senate. Do you feel that the student voice is adequately represented at UM?
Right, thank you, Guy. Well, we have actually been engaging the student body, the president, not just the local students, but also the president, the exco, the committees from the international student body that we have within the university. So remember, we had a period of time where we have where we were able to meet face to face. So we had series of sessions with them where we shared with them the how we have done last semester, the access to the internet, the access to the platform that we are using. We asked them on the kind of flexibility that they would like to have, in the sense that until what point in time they're able to drop and add without having to pay extra fees and things like that. Yes, we have been doing that. We have been engaging them on this, and also we also actually have given sort of a discount on services that was not fully used, because this MCO, for example, the library, so we actually give them discounts on facilities that was not fully utilized. Yeah. So going back to your question, I think we need to do more. Of course, there are student leaders, and as what Chris has mentioned, sometimes their inclination is very much of a political. But for us, we need to be reaching out to the students, the students that do not complain. Postgraduate students, for example, students from the B40, students from the marginalized group. So we are actually reaching out at the faculty levels to understand what are the problems, because even a small group, let's say if I'm taking care of 15 to 20 students, it was really a surprise for me, because I kind of assumed when they attend class, you're in a quiet room where you will be able to be listening, attending my lecture attentively. I didn't realize they are sharing a kitchen. That's the only way the internet is there. I could see her mom walking back and forth. That's where it is. We need to be taking care of students who really have these special needs. So for us, especially when we have programs, students with the disability, so we got some programs arranged for them. These are the ones that we must really be looking out for, because for us, like I said, the mantra that we have been working consistently when we make decisions is to make sure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, and that's great. You've actually answered a question that was raised in one of our Q&As as well about the concerns for students with disabilities, and you also touched on mental health, which is another question that's been raised. Voon, maybe I can move to you, and again, the importance of the student voice and how you see that moving forward over the next few months and indeed years here in Malaysia.
Well, the problem with, well, I wouldn't say it's a problem per se, but everybody doesn't know what's the solution. We actually, everybody's struggling to find a correct formula. So even universities, they, how do you determine, let's say if a student wants to go back to university? So we had one question earlier about library access that requires cooperation from the government, cooperation from universities, and there is already a cost factor involved, because if students are demanding that, hey, look, if we cannot come back to university, then we should have lower fees, and that affects the cash flows in the university to hire the appropriate staff to carry out certain functions. So I think this is the main challenge that universities will have in determining what to do next, and that's a very harsh reality. But yeah, I think engagement with student representatives is necessary. It is an important equation that cannot be put aside. But there needs to be practical solutions to those problems as well. So higher education institutions and student groups need to walk side by side, and they need to both see each other's problem as their own. So student groups need to see it from the shoes of the perspective of the universities, and universities also must see it from the perspective of students, and come up with solutions together. How do we go about this? It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I really don't know. I think we will try to figure this out in the coming months. And it's unfortunate that the NCO got extended. I think most of us were going to that phase like, okay, we can finally go back to normal. But with the extension, I think people felt like, okay, we didn't really figure things out that far. So what next? Should we continue doing online learning until forever? Or should we actually come up with another solution, like all of us wearing spacesuits and go to university? I don't know. But both student groups and universities just need to work together, need to share experiences, need to come up with solutions. And when one university comes up with that magic formula, they should share it with everyone else, share it with Ministry of Higher Education, and get that disseminated down to everybody else.
Right. I've got a few questions now from the audience, which I want to focus on. I don't know who wants to answer this question. I don't know what the answer is, but how will the postponement of major exams in Malaysia impact the enrollment of students into both private and public universities next year? What are the solutions, suggestions to the government? Maybe Prof Yong and Prof Baldwin, maybe you could comment on the postponement of major exams, or are there other things you need to worry about at the moment rather than that, or is that a major factor for you?
Right. Okay. I'll try
Prof Yong. Yeah, please.
This my best. Yeah. For the public university, we are very clear on the number of students enrollment, the intake. Right. There is no change at all. That is very clear. So we are very well aware of the postponement. So again, we will try to respond in such a way that we are working on we are working very closely with the Ministry of Higher Education to ensure at what point in time they will be able to process all the applications so that we can actually work on our academic calendar. So in fact, for the past 2 days, I've been checking with universities within the region in the UK and the US if there is any change in the academic calendar. So these are the informations that we need to be gathering when we decide at the university level, or even if we get the directive from the Ministry of Higher Education, because quite a number of things are at stake if we start changing things. And then again, like I said, and for the past 10 months, we have been going through where we have to make major decisions within a short time frame. And I think at this point in time, we are quite, we have to be one step ahead to look at different scenarios. How do we gonna address this? But in short, there is no decrease in the number of students intake in the next academic session. When is our academic calendar? When is the intake? This is something that we will have to be working with the Ministry of Higher Education. Thank you.
Chris from the private, thank you. Chris from the private sector, will it have an impact?
Well, I mean, it will have an impact on us. I think just thinking as a UK university, as we have to link in with the UK year, the academic year, I think clearly we've already thought about this with the SPM results, and we can move our foundation entry. That is not so much of a problem with the SPM results. I think where we have a problem is the STPM results, if they come out late, and it's unlikely that we will be able to change our academic year, unfortunately, and that's probably the same with the other UK campuses here. Some universities may have 2 entries, we only have 1. So I think that it's unfortunate, and then if people are going to want to come to us, then they may have to postpone for a year because we can't suddenly have a different entry from the UK because we have to match it. So I think that there's differences in the public and private universities and their ability to move with this. So I think that we're in quite a straitjacket, and I think you'll probably find that all UK universities will stay at their normal entry time, and so people are going to have to look and see what happens.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I was at a recent educational tech conference, and I had a great talk by a professor from Zhejiang University in China. He was, I think, working at the business school, and he said that China's gone back to normal. He showed a picture of his campus full of students. There wasn't very much social distancing, and they were back to normal classes. And he said that in a sense, China missed an opportunity. They went online, but their online was basically sticking a video camera in front of the lecturer. They didn't really develop any virtual learning, and then now they've just gone back to the old normal, if you want. Here in Malaysia, we've got lots of talk about the new normal and how things are going to change. But do you really think they are going to change? And do you think that after we've got through this crisis, and obviously we've heard news of the vaccine, that perhaps we're just going to go back to the old normal, and we'll be teaching and learning in the same way as before? Voon, can I turn to you first on that?
I don't think we can actually go back to normal. The expectation should be to expect COVID to last for quite some time, and even if we can come up with a vaccine, there's no telling whether there will be another crisis, another form of pandemic. So the wise course of action would be to be prepared, and come up with new solutions to how to live. This may require changes in infrastructure, how we design buildings, and come up with a means of how we can continue living. When I say new normal, we're using this as a catchphrase now, but yeah, how do we come to a normal situation where we can still function? Because we can't be staying at home all the time. We need to come up, we need to carry on. And I like one question that was posed, if there's any best practices that we can refer to in other countries. I'm not sure if we consider them best practices per se in other places, because they are almost acting like there is no pandemic. They're taking some precaution, but they are otherwise continuing on in a very risky environment, health risk environment. But maybe there is some rationale to that. Maybe they're returning to the universities, they're going to return to work with social distancing, with the application of SOPs. Maybe that's the way forward. We just need to be more careful. We can just hide away and rely on online learning the whole time. even with the advances of virtual reality, VR, there are limitations to what we can do with this technology, as mentioned. The science, biomedical science courses, the engineering courses, vocational courses, they all, for them to learn, they do need to return to a physical space. And how do we redesign that physical space would be the next challenge that higher education institutions will need to figure out. Perhaps the traditional physical classroom needs to change. Maybe it needs to break down to smaller units, and that requires thinking of new business models moving forward. And yeah, I think it's not a straightforward answer, but that's the best one I got.
Great, thank you. Vinci, how about you? Do you think we'll return to the old ways of teaching and learning, I guess, that you were used to in the first year and second year of your studies at Nottingham?
Personally, my opinion will be more or less the same as Voon. I do believe that there will be no way that we can return back to the old normal, but I do not believe that we will continue carry on in fully online learning as well. I do believe that when situation gets better, everyone has to back to their normal life per se. But I do think that government and all the authorities, businesses, as well as university, will take precaution in the future, just in case that there's any pandemic or any other circumstances that would put us into the same situation today. They will have a contingency plan on how can we react better in the future. So maybe that in the future, all the lecturers really have to understand the technology better in how are we going to conduct online classes and how are we going to integrate technology into the practice on how are we going to conduct the normal tasks that we're supposed to conduct normally.
Great, thank you. Yes, no, absolutely. It's that integration, isn't it? That new integration that we're looking for. Travis, how about you? Your view on this question?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think it's not that definite as in either black or white. Yeah, because I think we cannot make a decision right now. We can just only go with the scenario in front of us, like regarding on COVID-19. Yeah, so I think I can share a little bit of the new normal that I think is already accepted by youth. So I think, first of all, I think it's about the virtual learning environment. I think the youth has already in a process of accepting and, accepting the fact that we may not be going back to a physical situation that soon. And they, the earlier that they surrender, then the earlier that they can accept and they can adapt to the environment, right? Yeah, so I think that is the things that I observe on that. And then second of all, I think different parties are utilizing, the virtual platform, the benefit, as in bridging the geographic limitation. I think actually that could be one of the things that we can take the trend on, right on that, because I think that would be much easier and save much effort in connecting people from around the world regarding on, learning purpose or even other purpose. Yeah, so I think certain things that may not be accepted or we still need to work hard on the progress. I think it's echoing what Voon just mentioned. Yeah, because currently I'm in Hong Kong and I have a few friends that they're studying, physiotherapy, radiography. So, those kind of medical field that working with, X-ray or physiotherapy, it's very hard for them to learn virtual because all they need is a practical experience integration. Yeah, so I think that is the things that maybe the university or education body still have to work on that. Yeah, and I think we may need to look into the learning module as well, how we can integrate the experiences into more practical instead of just only one way through virtual learning. I think that would be the challenges and also the future potential opportunity that we can look into. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Absolutely, and I think, as you said, I think students are certainly getting used to this world of virtual learning. But Chris, maybe you could comment on also the question of whether you think there's permanent change, but also how much students are missing out on the social aspects of universities. I mean, maybe we can replace the learning outcomes of the curriculum, but it's difficult to replicate some of the social aspects, the sort of accidental aspects of university life.
Yeah, I must say I would love to see the campus full of students again, all meeting up, doing all of their societies and doing those things, which, as you say, is a critical part of university life. I mean, I always speak to my students when we start their programs, and I say that it's not all about the studying. The studying is very important, but you have new friends here, you have new societies, there are new things you should do, you should develop yourself across these things. So I think that there are aspects of online and virtual teaching that will come in. I don't think it will replace the campus having the support, having the face-to-face teaching, having the face-to-face seminars, and having the big group of students getting together in their clubs and their societies, doing things together. I know we always have, and I know they're having Nottingham and other universities, the big balls, and you have all the students doing their dancing and their music and everything. And it's a fantastic occasion. But I never think those things will go away. I think that students will still want that interaction with each other, because that's part of university life.
What about sort of, the big lecture halls with, I don't know, Marketing 101 or, introduction to some, do you think those will continue?
There's a lot of literature out there, and it's very conflicting to say that some people who are very zealots say it will never go on. Some people who you look at the literature and say it is useful. I think I like giving a lecture in front of 200 students. I stand there, wave my hands around, interact with them, and I have a good time. And I do feel it's a bit like an actor, and you're there and you're projecting and you're having a performance, and that's what people say. And I think that if you can give a good performance, with lots of academic staff I think students get that. So I do think there is value in some of those big lectures and some of those big sessions. I don't think you necessarily have to have every single one that you did before, but I think that you may have to chop and change and decide what you do.
Prof Yong, from your point of view, in terms of whether we're looking at a new normal, a permanent change, or we're going to go back to the old normal?
I totally agree with Chris, what Chris has said. There will be both. And I totally agree with him. For me as an academician, I really miss having students on campus. Really, as I drive through the campus, really quite what I see are just buildings. So I really would like to have the students population coming in. And like I said, like Chris has said, when people go to the university, it's not really much the content of the classes that they attend, but really the social aspect of it. So otherwise they would be taking up a course online. So I'm hopeful we will be able to do it one day. And perhaps again, it may not be exactly the same. Perhaps there will be some social distancing, but I do look forward to have some activities, students within the campus itself. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We've got some questions from the audience from Facebook. This webinar is both on Zoom and it's also on Facebook. What do you think of the quality of the graduates when their study periods is within this pandemic period, where they've been all online? Do you think that will affect the quality of the graduates? I mean, perhaps they'll have acquired new skills. Travis, do you want to comment on that? Do you think the quality of the graduates will be different?
Well, I would say yes, yeah, but in some sense, I would say the market, what kind of profile that they're looking for will be also quite different as well. Yeah, because I think in my role, I actually get in touch with some external partner as I'm working with employer branding with them in some sense. So actually they show a lot of desperation as in talent acquisition on we want a lot on virtual talents. Yeah, so what does it mean is that, they are very good in virtually, the tools on how we can conducting the meeting effectively, and not just only using the tools, but they know how to lead the people virtually. Like, that is the quality that they are looking for. And in some sense, I would say now the company or the market, they are no longer looking for just only, good GPA, those kind of hardcore equipment from a student profile. But instead of that, they look into a lot on the soft skills. Like, do they have growth mindset? When they, encounter difficulties, they will choose to escape or they will choose to ride on that and go through that. A lot of the company, they will challenge us are you creating a platform to nurture these kind of leaders? Yeah, so I think I would say the market reaction right now is a little bit different. So of course it will affect on the graduate qualities on that. Yeah, but mainly they will be more focusing on the virtual talents and also soft skills like whether team management on that as well. Yeah.
Sure, and whenever employers get surveyed, they always ask about resilience and adaptability.
Yes.
And if the student hasn't developed resilience and adaptability during this period, I don't know when they will. The students have had to be enormously resilient and enormously adaptable to the current situation. We're actually running out of time, I think, aren't we? We're scheduled to finish at 9:15, so I'm going to ask my last question around the panel. Let's start, Voon, let's start with yourself. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about 2021?
I'm a pessimist by nature, so no, definitely not. I think we are going to have a continued nightmare, and I just hope by then the vaccines do work. That's my hope, but I'm not holding my breath on that. I mean, we held our breath for the past few months, didn't we? And we seem to overcome sometime in May, June, and now we're back in this nightmare. So no, not too optimistic. I also like to just add one last point, if I may. We do not know what the fallout is on the market, and there are going to be many changes in the economy. We're already seeing more employment rates. I mean, it's improved in the recent months, thankfully. But how is the job market impacted by COVID, and how do we move forward from there? And the more scary matter that we more important matter that we need to address is the current students that are enrolled now suitable for the future workplace, a COVID-proof workplace. So I would say that because we need to remember that COVID is pretty much like a disruptor. It is the same like IR 4.0 is the same like how Grab has impacted the market. How do we react and how do we adapt to the changes that COVID has brought? Is something that I think universities need to look into. The Ministry of Human Resources need to look into. They need to see what kind of gaps are required. And who knows, maybe the content that we teach needs to change as well. Like, how do we incorporate a COVID-proof workplace? I think these kind of matters need to be considered. But yeah, I no. So, but the simple answer is no, not too optimistic. But that's me.
You seem to also discuss I think that's the topic for our next webinar, is preparing students for the world of the workplace in post-COVID. Yes, I deliberately started with yourself because I knew you'd be perhaps more on the pessimistic side. Hopefully we'll move across the spectrum. Vinci, tell us about how you're feeling about 2021.
I think I'm pretty optimistic about 2021 because that is the only I think that's what everyone have to, I mean, everyone have to stay positive in order to see the light towards the end of the tunnel. So I think the matter of whether staying optimistic or pessimistic is really about your perspective in how you view the situation. So personally, I understand that there might be a lot of restrictions on what we usually can do and cannot do. And somehow we thought that it was, the restriction is kind of coming to an end in somewhere in July, and we are back in lockdown now. So I think it's really the change of perspective on how you view things. So personally, I think that by studying at home, by studying at home, I did manage to spend a lot more time with my family, and I did manage to spend a lot more time with my team members in AMEU as well, because we really have a lot more time bonding session online and see how can we accompany each other to go through this COVID period together.
Great, and of course you're graduating in 2021 as well, so it's best to look optimistically for that. Travis, how about you? Your feelings for 2021?
Well, yeah, 2021, I guess it will be a mixture feeling. Yeah, actually, I have both. I am optimistic about the organization, no matter, corporate, university, or NGO, these bodies towards the society and also the community relevance. Yeah, because I think that is the things that I can see a lot momentum among the community, that these different bodies, they are trying their best and also the resources to allocate to the right people that is needed in COVID-19. Yeah. And second of all, I think I always put trust to our people. Yeah, because I think we have much more potential than we know. Yeah, so I think in this situation, I think a lot of young people, they are creating their new business or new idea on how they can, bring a greater goods for the community. So I think it showcases a lot on the creativity and agility under the current situation. But for the pessimistic side, I think definitely the economic recession is still ongoing. That can be shown and told by, the unemployment rate. And I have talked with certain companies that they are also, using some defending strategies, would defend until next year, December. Yeah, so they may not be tend to investing a lot on, let's say, CSR or other initiatives. Yeah, so regarding on that, definitely would be a huge hit towards the economic market. Yeah, but in general, I would say, as long as we are clear about what is needed for our people right now and we develop them, they would drive the changes that we wish to see in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Prof. Yong, optimistic or pessimistic for 2021?
I'm hopeful.
Okay.
Things will be slightly better because for the past few months, a steep learning curve for every one of us. We have experimented in so many things. And I think at the end of the day, if we look back, we have been pretty resilient. We have built up the strength to be more resilient. We know how to adapt. And I think I'm quite hopeful that perhaps in 2021, there will be some form of normalcy at the university, at least, at least there will be some students coming in on campus. There will be some events that we used to have face-to-face. We will be able to do it perhaps again in a slightly different version where we could have a hybrid kind of thing. So that's my take on that.
Great, thank you very much. Chris.
Oh, well, Guy, you've come to me last, I think, because you know that I'm a glass half full sort of person rather than a glass half empty.
I was hoping you were, yes.
Yeah, so I think obviously COVID-19 will still be with us for the next year. I think we are learning slowly how to live with it, how to continue working while we've got it, how to control it. I don't think a vaccine will be rapidly coming in, so we just have to learn to live with it, and we have to learn to go on. I think we know what SOP we need. We know what we can do. So really, I think that we will be here. We'll go on. But the main thing that I really think is we've got to remember the good things we've learned. Keep those good things we've learned. The things that haven't worked, get rid of those. Don't keep holding on to them again, and then try to think of new ways of working around, and then try to think as maybe leaders of our universities, but also staff, is to try to make sure that we bring our staff and our students along with us and make sure that they know what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're not doing things just to deliberately upset people. Everyone's trying to do their best in a very difficult situation.
Thank you very much. And I think on that positive note, we'll finish tonight's webinar. There were a few questions that we didn't necessarily directly answer in the Q&A, but some of us will try and answer them by typing the answers. But I did think we did cover a broad area. We did look at the key skills needed for students to be adaptable. We looked at a wide area in terms of how institutions are responding, the importance of the student voice. And I hope the audience out there, both on the Zoom and also on Facebook, found this instructive. And I hope this is the first of many webinars that both iGraduate and KSI will host. Thank you very much to all the panelists for joining us. It's getting quite late now. It's around 9:25. And thank you to the audience, both, as I say, on Zoom and Facebook. And thank you for the questions that you put to us. So with that, I'll close the panel, and thank you very much, everybody, and good night.